Good morning. My name is Chase Hensel, and my topic is climate change on sports. Climate change in the past decade has become an exponentially increasing problem, affecting people's day-to-day lives globally. But how does climate change affect sport? Well, let's take, for example, the College Board Stimulus article Hoops by Bo Baminger. In this article, he speaks on the thousands of photos he has taken of basketball hoops across the world, with some of these places being Portland, Oregon, and Harlem, New York. These locations are used by sports enthusiasts and people who love to play the sports recreationally. But what is to happen when many of these locations may not be able to be used or not available in the coming decades due to rising heats or coastal city floodings due to rising sea levels? Or the only location that people can enjoy the sports they love is from the safety of their own home or in an indoor environment. This leads to the question, to what extent will sports in open venues impact countries a part of the International Olympics Committee as a result of climate change in the current decade? And my response to this is that sports athletes in open venues will be damaged and negatively impacted as a result. Just to start, one of the biggest impacts climate change has had is on global weather. This change in weather is affecting both open venues and outdoor sports. In the article, Climate Change, Sports Heading to a Fall, as Temperatures Rise by Matt McGrath, he speaks on some examples of this, such as the Carlisle grounds here being flooded by Storm Desmond in 2015 in the UK, and here of a rugby tournament about to be canceled at Japan's World Cup due to these harsh storms. These examples sort of show that it's not just the sports themselves that are being damaged, but also the locations that these sports are taking place at. With many of these locations being flooded and taking time to fix and become working again, it is reducing the amount of locations that these sports can take place at. And for the UK, this is a serious impact for their future, with it being predicted that by 2050, 1 in 4 English Football League grounds can expect flooding every year. Harsh storms are not the only kind of weather that's being affected. High heat are also becoming a lot more common as well. In this graph by Nike in their article Climate and Sport, we see 4 major cities across different regions of the world showing an increase in temperature. Each bar represents a 30-year period, with the first bar being from 1970 to 1990, the second bar being from 2010 to 2030, and the final bar being from 2040 to 2060. This shows that in these different regions and these major cities, there is exponentially increasing average temperatures in the next coming decades. And with many of these locations having hotspots for sports activities and sports competitions, this can seriously affect the sporting world. For example, in November 2018, wildfires affected the Berkeley Half Marathon, causing it to be canceled due to unhealthy air quality levels. And in cities like Perth and Adelaide, seeing a 60% increase in temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius in the coming decade. High heat aren't just affecting the sports, they're also affecting the athletes themselves. Take, for example, this Joe Root, the England cricket captain who was seen hydrating at a Sydney Test match in this photo here. In the article, Cancelled Races, Fainting Players, How Climate Change is Affecting Sport by Lynn Taylor, it was later revealed that this test match hit a high of 42 degrees Celsius or 107 degrees Fahrenheit. And Joe Root was later sent to the hospital that day due to dehydration and exhaustion. This is to show that all athletes can be affected by heat-related physical effects, from new athletes to the scene to more experienced ones like Joe Root is. There's also been a statement put out by the World Health Organization stating that heat stress linked to climate change is likely to cause 38,000 extra deaths a year between the years 2030 and 2050. Summer sports are not the only area affected by climate change. Winter ice sports are seeing a considerable less amount of ice per year. If we look at this chart from the article The Future of Winter Sports and Recreation by Nick Bradford, we see that in the northeast quadrant of the United States, ice thaw dates are happening up to 23 days earlier over in this area. These locations are having smaller seasons for ice-related sports activities, such as ice skating, ice fishing, and ice hockey. The National Hockey League has come out with a statement on this, saying that our sport is affected by climate change more than any other, and that our sport was born in the frozen paths of North America. This article is to show that for ice sports, the loss of these natural locations is hard on them, as if losing the origin of their sport. And while there is indoor ice rinks available, it is not the same for these athletes as practicing on the natural ice. Not all sports have suffered hardships due to climate change. One sport that has benefited is surfing. Due to the warmer waters and rising sea levels, big waves, which is what surfers strive to do in their career, strive to surf on in their career, are becoming more frequent and more popular around the world, making the sport be more popular for athletes as well as the fans watching them. But with such a damaging notion that is climate change, and there being dozens of more sports that have been negatively impacted as compared, it is to see that it has caused more harm than good. A potential solution for the more competitive side of sports are indoor stadiums, like this one here, which is a new HOK design in Atlanta, one of the first built LEED, meaning it was built for energy and environmental design. In the article, "We Need to Climate-Proof Our Sports Stadiums" by Paul Govind, this stadium is talked about, saying it uses 40% less water on average, as well as uses 4,000 solar panels to support electricity costs, as well as having an overall reduced carbon footprint compared to regular stadiums. And the most beneficial part for the athletes is the retractable roof on top, which is closed in this photo. This lets them enjoy the outdoor sports in an open venue when conditions permit, but also keeps them safe during harsh storms and high heats. There are some limitations to this design though. With these stadiums being highly expensive, these cannot be built all across the world, and they can only be built in locations that can support them. As well as these being pertained to more of the competitive sides of sports that can happen indoors, rather than more of the natural side of sports. In the end, climate change has and will continue to have a lasting effect on the sporting industry, with increased severity of weather and rising heats, the decreasing physical health of athletes, and the loss of winter sports. Thank you.
I do have two questions for you. Number one, how valid and reliable were the sources that you used, and then how do you know they were?
So many of the sources I used came from authors who had a background in the environmental or environmental-based fields, such as one of the authors I talked about earlier, Matt McGrath. He is an environmental correspondent who focuses on the environmental as a whole, as well as climate change. He also is one of BBC's major BBC news sources' biggest writers on climate change, and that is one of the major news articles in the UK.
All right, what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
I would say to always make sure that your evidence is reliable. Climate change is an ever-changing event happening in our day and age, and that if you go too far back, the information might not be as valid as it is to more recent information that has been found. And try to keep your evidence consistent within the past couple years.